Welcome back to my channel. In this video I'll be showing you how to make Turkish Kunefe, which is a Middle Eastern dessert made from pastry and cheese. The full measurements are written in the description box of this video. If you're also new to my channel, make sure to like and subscribe. We're going to begin by making the sugar syrup, so add the water into a pan and then add in the sugar. You then just want to give this a quick mix just to help the sugar dissolve into the water. And then over a medium heat, just allow the mixture to come to the boil. And then once it's boiling, you then want to add in the lemon juice. This will help it to stop crystallizing. You then want to leave the syrup to cook on the side for about 5 to 10 minutes and thicken slightly. So whilst the syrup is thickening on the side, you want to prepare the pastry. You will need Kataifi pastry, also known as kunafe dough, and this will come packed in long strands. You then want to break it into small pieces like this, just with your fingers. I'll leave a link in the description box to the one I've used, but you can find this pastry in most Middle Eastern stores and even South Asian food stores. So once you've broken it into strands, it should look like this. Now checking back on the syrup, and it's reduced almost down by half, so this is ready to turn off and leave aside. So once all the pastry has been shredded, you then want to add in the melted butter. Make sure that the butter is not too hot, and then you just want to rub this into the pastry really well. This will usually take a few minutes for the butter to be absorbed. You'll know when it's done as the kunafe pastry will turn a yellowish colour. Some recipes use ghee to absorb the pastry, and however I prefer to use salted butter for this, as I find that it gives it a really good balance and stops the dessert from being too overly sweet. However, it is up to you. You can use unsalted butter or ghee as well. So once all the butter has been absorbed, it should look like this, and then just leave this aside for now. We're now going to make the butter mixture, which is used to line the kunafe trays. For this, add grape molasses into the softened butter. You can use any other molasses, but however I prefer to use grape for this recipe. And then just give this a really good mix, just to make sure that the molasses is mixed in really well with the butter. So this butter mixture should look like this when done. To make authentic kunafe, you will need kunafe trays, which can be found online and in most Middle Eastern stores. If you can't get hold of them, you can also use a muffin tray or 2 non-stick pans around the same size. You then want to add a heaped tablespoon of the butter and molasses mixture to grease the trays. It does get messy, but the best way to do this is to use your fingers, and you want to make sure you get a good layer at the bottom and go up the sides, and be generous when doing this, as you don't want the pastry to stick. If you're going to be using a non-stick pan, you don't have to add as much butter. These trays are made of steel and they're quite thin, so the pastry does stick quite easily, which is why I'm using so much. You then just want to repeat the same process for the second tray or second pan, depending on what you're going to be using. We're going to need 2 trays or 2 pans for one kunafe, as we're going to be flipping it over and cooking the other side as well. So if you're going to be using a muffin tray, you just want to do the same process and just add a layer at the bottom and go all the way up to the sides. So now that I've got 2 plates ready for one kunafe, I'm going to start adding in the pastry. You want to add the layer quite lightly at first, as you don't want a really thick layer. If you add too much pastry, the heat won't go through to the middle to melt the cheese fast enough, and you'll find that the pastry starts to burn and the middle is not cooked. So once you've spread a thin layer across, use a flat cup or spoon and lightly press the pastry down. Make sure to go up against the sides to shape it around the edges. By doing this, you'll be able to see any molasses and butter appearing. This means you need to add more pastry there, and it'll make sure that you don't get a really thick layer, and only add pastry when it's needed. And as you can see now, I can't see any of the butter or molasses, and I've got a really thin layer of pastry. And then I'm just pressing this down again. So authentic kunafe is made using string cheese such as hatib, which comes from a village in Turkey. However, fresh mozzarella cheese is the best alternative if you're unable to find Turkish cheese. You then just want to add a thin layer of this on top of the pastry. When adding the cheese, just make sure that you don't take it straight to the edge, leave a bit of space, and then once you've added it all, you then want to add a layer of the pastry again on top. Make sure that you can't see any of the cheese, as you don't want the cheese melting through any spaces and then burning the pastry. And then again, you just want to slightly press down the pastry just to flatten it out, and you'll be able to see if you've got any gaps, and then you can just fill it in with more pastry. And then I'm using a flat knife and then just kneading up the edges by pushing the pastry away from yourself into the middle. You then want to take the knife down the sides very slowly and push it away from the edge of the tray. This will give it a really nice shape and make sure the edges are sealed. You then just want to clean up the tray and then it's ready to make. For the muffin trays, you just want to repeat the same process. However, obviously this time you just need to go slightly higher up the sides and make sure that you've got a slightly thicker layer on the sides, just so that the kunafe cup will be able to hold itself. And then I'm just going to fill in the middle with the cheese again like before, and then top it with the layer of pastry on top. If you're making kunafe in the muffin trays, you only need to grease 1 cup for 1 kunafe, as we're not going to flip these over, as when you bake them in the oven, the heat will cook from the bottom and top at the same time, so there's no need to flip them. And then I'm just neatening these up again and just running the knife down the sides just to give it a good seal. And then you just want to bake these in the oven, in a preheated oven at gas mark 5 for about 6 to 8 minutes. So the authentic way to make kunafe is over a burner, and you want to make sure that you have the tray placed over the smallest burner possible and have it on the lowest heat. You want to make sure that you're constantly moving this tray as it burns very easily, and you only need to cook it for around 2 to 3 minutes on each side. And I'm just running down the sides with the knife, and as you can see that the butter has started to melt and the pastry will start to absorb this very quickly. It's also important to give the pan or the tray a very good shake just to make sure that it's not sticking. So after 2-3 minutes you'll begin to see there's hardly any butter left. You then want to grab the second tray and place this on top and then carefully flip it over. Carefully lift up the top plate and then you can neaten up the edges. The cooking time on each side is approximate and will depend on your cooker. Just make sure you flip it over before all the butter is absorbed, as this will stop any sticking of the pastry onto the plate. But it should only take around 2 to 3 minutes, and just make sure you're always moving the plate or the pan. So it's been about 2.5 minutes. You can take it off the heat at this stage. However, I prefer to place it in the oven for another 5 minutes, and this will give it a nice crispy top and make sure the cheese reaches a much warmer temperature and stays melted for a longer time. So the kunafe cups are also done, so I'm just going to flip them out onto a flat plate. And then to garnish, I'm going to add on some pistachio. You then just want to soak the kunafe cups in the sugar syrup. Make sure the kunafe is still really warm, and you can also slightly warm up the sugar syrup as well. It's up to you how sweet you like this, and then depending on that you can add as much sugar syrup you want. And then I'm going to repeat the same process for the kunafe in the tray. The kunafe does really absorb a lot of the syrup, so you just need to give it a few minutes, and then I'm just going to garnish it with more pistachio. The kunafe is then ready to eat and is best served straight away while it's warm, as the cheese is still melted. You can serve the kunafe with ice cream or clotted cream, and then serve it with some Turkish tea. Thank you for watching, and if you like this recipe, make sure to like, comment and subscribe to my channel. Make sure to follow me over on my official Instagram page, Fooditives. The link is in the description box of this video, where you will find all my written recipes. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.